Hi everyone, this is Hannah,
Angie,
Henry,
Jacob,
and Todor. We want to know everything about Simvastatin.
I think Chris and I can help you with that. My name is Eleanor and I have a background in community pharmacy.
And I'm Chris. I should be able to help you with some of the chemistry questions.
Great. So Eleanor, how were statins initially discovered?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's have a quick history lesson. Cholesterol was isolated from gallstones in 1780. And interest grew over the 20th century as doctors and scientists started linking high cholesterol to atherosclerosis and strokes. But it wasn't until 1964 that cholesterol synthesis was understood.
That's right, and an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase was identified as an ideal drug target for lowering plasma cholesterol in humans. Following this, a drug company called Merck developed lovastatin from metabolites of the Aspergillus terrace fungus.
Sure, but what about simvastatin though?
Shortly after lovastatin, Merck developed Simvastatin, which built on the affinity of lovastatin and increasing its bioavailability by adding a methyl group to the acyl moiety at C1.
This nearly doubled the biological effect of the drug and made it much more successful.
Interesting. What is it in simvastatin's structure that makes it so potent?
Well, we can get to that a bit later, but first let's look at the structure of simvastatin. Can you identify the main functional groups?
Okay, let's see. Simvastatin contains a hydroxy group, a cyclic ester,
Which is otherwise known as?
a lactone.
It also has several aliphatic regions and chains, as well as an ester functional group.
Fantastic! Now Chris has a quick question for you.
Thanks, Elle. So, does the drug follow Lipinski's rules if it has a molecular weight of 418.6 and a log P of 4.48?
Well, I think so. I can count 1 hydrogen bond donor and 5 acceptors.
Spot on. This gives us an indication that the drug will have a good oral bioavailability.
Wow, that's great. So how can this drug be synthesized?
Simvastatin is usually synthesized from lovastatin. The acyl group of lovastatin is methylated at C1, but it's not that simple. It's actually a multi-step process. There are multiple synthesis pathways, but Chris will focus on the most common method.
Sure. So first, lovastatin is hydrolyzed to yield the key intermediate monocolin J. The acid is then lactinized to protect the hydroxyl group at C11. Then, the C13 hydroxyl group is protected by trimethylsialylation. The protected monocolin J is then acylated by dimethylbutyryl chloride to yield the protected form of simvastatin. This is then deprotected to give simvastatin in its closed ring form. The lactone rings are enzymatically hydrolyzed in vivo to produce the polar head groups which represent the active drug.
Okay, but once we have simvastatin, what is it used for?
To treat hypercholesterolemia, patients with high cholesterol levels have high risk of developing coronary artery disease. This is where excess cholesterol in the bloodstream leaves plaque deposits in the arteries. As this grows, it can block arteries and restrict blood flow to the heart. This can cause angina or even heart attacks.
That sounds serious. What causes hypercholesterolemia?
It's typically a mix of genetic and environmental factors. Patients with existing conditions such as diabetes or hypothyroidism are at higher risk, but also lifestyle choices such as poor diet or smoking can increase the risk. Genetics also play a part. Mutations in the LDLR gene cause high levels of LDL in the blood and can be inherited from your parents.
Is there anything else that simvastatin is used to treat?
Yes, the drug is also used to treat hyperlipidemia, which is an umbrella term that refers to any of the several acquired or genetic disorders that result in a high level of lipids, fat, cholesterol, and triglycerides circulating in the blood. It is also used as a preventative measure for cardiovascular disease in patients with atherosclerosis or diabetes mellitus.
So now we know the disease is associated with cholesterol and that simvastatin is used to treat them, but what is its mechanism of action?
In order to understand the mechanism of action, first we have to appreciate the biosynthesis pathway of cholesterol. You may remember I mentioned HMG-CoA reductase earlier. This is the key component in the rate-limiting step and is used to reduce HMG-CoA to mevalonate. Simvastatin inhibits this enzyme.
Yeah, I remember. So what does HMG-CoA reductase do in the body?
It's an enzyme that catalyzes the reduction of HMG-CoA to mevalonate, which is a precursor to cholesterol, the polymeric enzyme that has two active sites embedded between two adjacent monomers. When HMG-CoA comes into contact with the active site, it binds to the monomer, while the enzyme's cofactor NADPH binds to the neighbouring monomer.
Could you explain what the mechanism of this reaction is, Chris?
Sure, a dual hydride transfer occurs across 3 steps. As a result, the S-CoA leaves, and the carbonyl group is reduced to a hydroxyl group by 2 NADPH molecules.
So how is simvastatin related to this?
Simvastatin acts as an inhibitor to this enzyme, preventing the production of mevalonate. Simvastatin is partially metabolized by the liver during first pass by a cytochrome P450 enzyme, called CYP3A4, to a beta-hydroxy acid. This active metabolite now competitively binds to the active site of HMG-CoA reductase and reversibly inhibits it by blocking the binding of HMG-CoA. This halts the cholesterol biosynthesis pathway.
Interesting. Then what is simvastatin's pharmacophore?
Here is simvastatin and its pharmacophore. You may notice similarities between it and the structure of HMG-CoA. This enables it to bind to the same active site.
However, it has a much higher binding strength thanks to the decalin ring and butyryl group. These provide additional hydrophobic interactions with the nearby exosite.
But why is simvastatin not broken down by the HMG-CoA reductase enzyme in the same way HMG-CoA is?
Great question. In HMG-CoA, the S-CoA portion acts as a good leaving group. However, it's not present in simvastatin as it's replaced by a stable hydrophobic group which is resistant to metabolism. This high affinity and metabolic resistance is actually what makes simvastatin a potent inhibitor.
Ah, that makes sense. So how does the drug bind at the enzyme?
Well, as I previously mentioned, its active form has a beta-hydroxy acid, which is shown here in a more accurate spatial representation. Actually, we can take a look at the group interactions now. The carboxylic acid group has ionic interactions with 2 amino groups. The beta and gamma hydroxyl groups act as hydrogen bond donors and acceptors. Chris will now explain to you what happens to HMG-CoA reductase once simvastatin binding occurs.
Thanks, Elle. So, when the substrate binds, an alpha helical section of the enzyme folds over the active site, shielding it from water and creating a narrow hydrophobic binding region for the CoA portion of the substrate. This conformational change of the flexible C-terminus exposes a binding site for the bulky hydrophobic groups of the statin molecules. So, Jacob, in reference to your earlier question, the additional methyl group helps to create stronger hydrophobic binding to this alpha helical section, making simvastatin twice as potent as lovastatin. The ability to manipulate the shape of the enzyme structure in order to shut off the binding site makes statins in general very effective inhibitors.
But don't they give any side effects?
Unfortunately, they do. Myopathy is a common on-target side effect in patients treated with greater dosages of simvastatin. Symptoms include muscle pain, tenderness, or weakness.
So, how does simvastatin-induced myopathy occur?
The mechanism is unclear, however, theories exist. Since simvastatin inhibits HMG-CoA reductase, the production of mevalonate is inhibited. Mevalonate is the precursor for the coenzyme Q10 molecule, which is involved in energy production via the mitochondria. This suggests that a decrease in CoQ10 could explain the adverse muscle effects, such as muscle fatigue.
Are there any other off-target side effects?
Yes, the drug can also give side effects such as anemia. Heme oxygenase 1 degrades heme to carbon monoxide, biliverdin, and iron, which is recycled. Statins have been occasionally reported to induce this enzyme, ultimately reducing levels of hemoglobin in the blood.
Oh, that is so interesting.
Wow, I actually think we ran out of questions. You've answered everything we wanted to know about simvastatin. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
We hope this helped you. Bye!